In light of the fact that it's pouring rain outside, we hope that everybody feels comfortable to stay throughout the end of the meeting. The alternatives are a little damp. We're going to get started with our third formal session, which is entitled Perspectives on Opportunities and Limitations in Low and Middle Income Countries. One of the things that we are concerned about is that the incidence and prevalence of many of the conditions that gene drive technologies would be used to address are highest in countries where there is perhaps the lowest level of governance and civic participation in understanding and regulation of science. And so the question becomes how to interact both in a potentially beneficial and also regulatory way with researchers and with governments and with populations in lower and middle income countries. We have three speakers today who we recognize as very important spokespeople for much, much larger populations and perspectives, and we are grateful to them for traveling somewhat long distances to be here. Our first speaker will be Dr. Diran Makinde, who is from the Africa Biosafety Network of Expertise, and he's going to speak on the role of science in the development and governance of biosafety, of biotechnology research in African countries. So, Dr. Makinde.
Thank you, Liz, and I want to thank the organizers for thinking about African Union and the new Partnership for African Development to hear African voices on this issue. And I thank Liz this morning because of her statement when she said this is more of information gathering. And that's exactly what I want to give you, to share information where we are in Africa. But one thing that is sure again is that I found myself for the last 6 years doing what is called science diplomacy. And it's more of a high-level advocacy. How do you get the policymakers to understand the technology? How do they understand the science? All they want to see is the benefits. What are you talking about? Hey, Makinde, just tell us quickly. You know, so this is what I would just want to share with you. And I want you to see right from the beginning, what are the African political leaders thinking? In the sense that they came up last year to formulate what is called Science, Technology, Innovation Strategy for Africa, which we call STISA 2024. So that is to identify the roles and the tools to make African member states play, their own roles in the global economy. And these are the tools that we know will be used. And these are also the need for us in Africa to set priorities, research priorities. What are the needs? So that is exactly what we're seeing. And what are our priorities in Africa now? Number one is that eradication of hunger and ensure food and nutrition security. We know that. And then health issues. So those are the two main ones we are focusing on at NEPAD. And what else? To say that what are the key domains? You see that it's all about water. But what is African Union? What's the relationship between African Union and NEPAD? African Union Commission actually focuses on policy issues. And this is the governance structure. And then NEPAD, New Partnership for African Development Planning and Coordinating Agency, is the technical arm which is supposed to implement programs from the African Union. And these are all the sectors we work with. That is, we focus on the regional economic communities, ECOWAS, COMESA, AMGRAB, then to national level. And we work with other institutions in Africa, including the African Academy of Sciences. So this is exactly what I want you to understand. But my unit, my network, which is the African Biosafety Network Expertise, ABNI, we focus on two priorities in order to do what exactly our political leaders wanted. That is, focus on crop plants. And in our program, we focus on the food crops. And number two, health issues. These tools for control of malaria transmission. And inside that, under the National NEPA Science Technology Innovation Hub, we also have what is called medicines regulatory harmonization. That is, member states do not have to repeat clinical trials or drug trials. If Ghana has already conducted a survey or trial, why should Nigeria or Togo bother again to repeat the same? Because it wastes time and resources. So this is exactly what we're doing. But I need to let you know what are the issues, what are the constraints when it comes to regulatory frameworks development, because ADNI was set up to build functional regulatory systems in Africa. And you must have known about all this. Number one is the policy issue. Then the limited capacity that we have, the low critical mass. And of course, what are the issues? And this is more of political, especially the trade issues. Then we talk about the expensive infrastructure for trials, and then the processes. And you may not believe it. I always give the US example that there are 3 agencies in America, and they don't fight amongst themselves. But you find that there are problems between ministries. Environment will be on one side, agriculture will be on the other. And then you have science and technology also making their own. I can spend a lot of time on this slide, but just to show you the 4 main constraints that we have. The progress we are making in Africa are syndicated. From there was a previous slide that showed the Clyde James slide of 2014. But we can see that we have increased the number of hectares that we use from 2013, and it keeps increasing, but there's a particular problem with Burkina Faso, and it's all about politics again. And then when you look at the number of countries conducting trials on food security alone, and these are banana, cassava, potato, cowpea, maize, and so on and so forth. And then the traits are now broadened. So I find that when the 3 are on tropical pests and diseases, and then nutritional enhancement on cassava, on banana, and so on and so forth. Then nitrogen use efficient and salt tolerance maize. These are all going on in Africa. And the one that is of interest is this cut flower, Gypsophilia, which our colleagues in Kenya are doing. So these are the approved events you have, and as expected, South Africa is the leading country on this, with a lot of commodities, and you find that Burkina Faso has Roundup Ready Bulgur 2. Sudan has its genes from both China and India. So, and this is what should interest you again. When we started, we were only talking about 3 countries, South Africa, Egypt, and Burkina Faso. But look at the number of countries now that are involved. So you have Ghana conducting trials, Nigeria, Cameroon, and so on and so forth, those in green. And we're expecting something to come out very soon from Uganda. And what you should look at here is the number of countries which conducting confined field trials and have their laws in place. And those, and that's only one, that is Uganda, conducting trials without a law, but we're expecting that law to come. But of more concern is these countries in orange that are 10, that they have the law, but the laws are not investor-friendly. So nobody's applying to conduct trials in their countries. So this is the present status. That is, you can see all this. And this is the new one that has about 7 institutions. We call it uncommon collaborators. And NEPAD is leading this consortium with inputs from University of California, Davis, Mars Incorporated, and so on and so forth. And we are focusing on those African crops that are of no interest to the global economy, but which are very important to Africans. And that is where we're doing. And so we have the laboratories in Nairobi, ICRAF, and we set up this plant breeding academy through the assistance of the University of California, Davis, where we train masters and PhD plant breeders to acquire new skills. So, and again, on the malaria control, we have almost all these techniques going on. This has been done, and my colleague from Burkina Faso is here, and this has been done in, I think, also in Burkina Faso, with Mali collaborating, and this one actually focusing on 3 countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Uganda. And this parasitogenesis using mosquito gut bacteria to actually attract Plasmodium is being done in Zambia. So we have a lot of this. Then the genetically improved tilapia has been on, but we have not started the real work. Because our involvement in all this is actually to come up with the framework, with the regulatory framework. How do you develop the contained facility? How do you also do the general release? And so, but of interest to me when I went for this meeting in Cambridge earlier this year was on this NPBT. The Europeans are very keen on this because it doesn't require regulation. And they see that it could be a way of actually catching up with the US. They don't need to pay any royalty to any American multinational. So this is of interest, and a lot of people are actually encouraging us. And I can tell you now that these techniques are actually being applied at the Agricultural Research Council of South Africa in Pretoria. So we are quite delighted to see that, and we will be part of the international group working on that. So what we need to now see is this funding leverage is a big issue. It's true, this technology is imported. But you see, we only do trials in Africa. We are not able to go to the upstream to actually do and come up with our own innovation. It's all trial. So we still lack that ownership. But one thing that is good, again, is that most of the genes now are getting expired. So we are getting off-patent genes, which our local seed companies can take advantage of, but we need a big effort in monitoring what they do so that we don't get ourselves in big problem when it comes to the quality of the seeds. So you find that we have all these gamma, but they do not contribute much to capacity building, infrastructure building, and funding for research. But South Africa has shown one example that actually you can get a lot of resources from within when you have funds coming from agro-industries levies, national lotteries, and you find that most of the influential or rich Africans, they prefer to sponsor football clubs. Now, that is where they will actually be able to assert their influence. So we are trying to push it so that we can have funding from domestic sources and have African ownership involved in this work. And so with happening, these are the things we've been able to see, to do. And like I said, when it comes to containment facilities, we prefer to bring our regulators to Brazil, US, India, Philippines. We've done that for the transgenic insect. We brought them to Maryland and Virginia earlier this year so that they can see how it can be provided. But I tell you, they come up with funding, for the budget, and the government will say, oh, this is not in our priority. So, and then look at as applied to GM mosquito work too. These are the things we have been able to achieve, that policies and regulations are in place. Countries use risk assessment approaches, which are the things that is in our domain, and then to increase the critical mass of regulators with competencies in these areas. So this is some of the things we do, and our concerns are more of how do we sustain the efficiency and the functionality of the regulatory frameworks. And the risk of backsliding. You focus on a country. I can tell you when when we started this program, I was thinking Kenya would be the third country to commercialize the technology. But look at where we are now. And you see that because of the activism, the activists meet all these policymakers one-on-one and pump them with all sorts of misinformation. That is what we are grappling with in Africa. So you find that, again, like I said, no coherent position among government agencies. And elections, democracy is good, it's sweet, but could also be a problem at times, but an opportunity. So we have all this as concern. But the take-home message I have for you is that gene drive is needs-based in Africa. I mean, you don't have problem of malaria. We are the ones that actually need to deal with it. You don't have problem of food insecurity. We have to do it. So it is needs-based in Africa. And so we need to do a lot of work on the regulatory regime framework, and there is need for co-development of ideas and technology initiated in the North, that is here, and the need for increasing technical capacity of African laboratories. You train a lot of Africans. Some of them are not keen to go back because they know that when they go back, they will just carry the degree and nothing else will emanate from that. So we need to build good partnerships and collaborations. And so we will take our time, and I can tell you Africa is evolving. It's really evolving. And the issue of trust is being mentioned here this morning, that when it comes to private-public partnerships, the issue of trust is very important, it's crucial to other regulations, standards, and practices. Africa's future should not be seen as an extrapolation of its past. Let us forget about that. It's going to be another good one. And additional consideration for gene drive are that we need a sound scientific basis for identifying risks and determining regulatory requirements for implementation, training opportunities for regulators on technical issue and regulatory system, and access to expertise as technical advisors to regulators and other decision makers. So these are some of the issues we need to actually grapple with, and thank you very much.